A Roman general stood proudly at the center of his banquet, goblet raised, laughing as silk was pulled away from a wooden box. Inside it wasn't gold. It wasn't wine. It was a child. Naked, breathing, and silent. A gift, he said, for my victories. But one guest that night didn't toast. One man couldn't unsee it. This is the story of how a single moment of cruelty became the start of something Rome could never silence. Stay until the end to witness how one child and one decision changed everything inside the empire. The banquet hall of General Lucius Aelius was a marvel of excess. Dozens of torches lined the walls, flickering against red marble. Slaves moved silently between rows of senators and merchants, pouring honeyed wine and presenting bowls of olives, dates, and roasted swan. Musicians played soft lyres near the columns. It was Rome at its most decadent. The general, recently returned from the conquest of Dacia, had prepared a surprise. He rose from his reclining couch, goblet in hand. "Friends," he announced, "what is a victory without a token worthy of the blood we shed?" A murmur of drunken agreement followed. Two servants wheeled out a small wooden crate draped in deep violet silk. Gold trim lined the edges. Lucius smiled. "Behold, my gift." With a flourish he pulled the silk away. The crate was opened. Inside was a boy, maybe 10 years old, curled like a frightened animal. His skin was pale under the torchlight. His wrists were raw. A thin collar of bronze hung around his neck. The room fell into uneasy silence. Someone laughed awkwardly. Lucius turned to a senator. "He was found in a Dacian temple. The priest used him as an offering. Now he's mine." The boy didn't move. A guest asked, "Does he speak?" Lucius shrugged. "He breathes. That's enough." He leaned closer to the boy and lifted his chin. "You'll be called Vitus now. That was my brother's name. He died a coward. You'll replace him." Vitus didn't react. From the far end of the hall, a man watched silently. His name was Marcus Valerius, a commander under Lucius. He had fought beside him for years. But what he saw in that crate didn't sit like victory. It sat like rot. After the feast, Marcus walked past the chamber where the boy had been taken. 2 guards stood outside. Inside he heard coughing, whispering, whimpering. He kept walking. But that night he didn't sleep. He had seen too many things on the battlefield, dying soldiers, burning villages, but nothing clung to his mind like the image of that child, knees pulled to his chest inside a box called a gift. The next morning, as sunlight struck the domus, Lucius summoned his commanders for wine and strategy. Marcus was last to arrive. He looked at the general and asked calmly, "What will you do with the boy?" Lucius smirked. "Train him. Use him. Break him if I must." Marcus's jaw tightened. "You disagree?" Lucius asked. Marcus didn't answer. He didn't need to. Later that day he returned to the chamber. The guards were gone. Inside, the boy sat alone, staring at a basin of water. Marcus knelt. "I won't touch you," he said softly. The boy flinched anyway. Marcus looked him in the eye. "My name is Marcus. I'm not like him." The boy whispered, barely audible, "Vitus isn't my name." Marcus nodded. "Then tell me your real one, and I'll remember it, even if no one else will." The boy said nothing, but a tear ran down his cheek. Marcus returned the next morning, alone again, carrying bread wrapped in linen and a small cup of goat's milk. The boy was still in the same position, knees drawn to his chest on a cushionless marble bench. The collar remained around his neck, casting a bronze reflection in the early light. The bruises beneath it had darkened overnight. Marcus placed the food on the floor near the wall. "I'm not going to stay," he said gently, "but I'll come back when you're ready." He stood in the doorway a moment longer, then left without another word. Later that night, Lucius hosted another gathering. This time the boy wasn't brought out. Marcus sat quietly near the back, nursing his wine. Every toast, every laugh felt like something obscene. One guest, a young senator from Sicilia, leaned toward Marcus and asked, "The boy, does Lucius truly mean to keep him as a personal pet?" Marcus looked up, his voice like stone. "He's not a pet. He's a person." The senator blinked, surprised. "Oh, I thought. You thought wrong." Lucius heard the exchange and laughed from across the room. "My dear Marcus, still wearing that soldier's heart like armor? It won't last long in Rome." Marcus didn't reply. That night he returned to the chamber. The bread was gone. The boy sat awake watching the doorway. His eyes tracked Marcus like a hunted animal, unsure if the next step meant help or harm. Marcus sat on the floor across from him. I don't want anything from you, he said. But I need to know your name. The boy's voice was hoarse. Arion. It was barely a whisper. But it was a beginning. Marcus repeated it. Arion. Is that Dacian? The boy shook his head. Greek. How did you end up in Dacia? I don't remember. Marcus nodded. Then we'll start from here. Over the next few days, Marcus brought food, water, and small tokens. A woven cloth for warmth, a tiny carved figurine of a horse. Arion didn't speak much, but he listened. One morning, Marcus found him washing his own wounds in the basin. Carefully. Determined. He still wore the collar, but now his posture had changed. Less broken, more guarded. Then came the command from Lucius. The boy will be brought to the garden, he told a servant. He's to serve drinks to the guests tomorrow. I want them to see what I've tamed. Marcus stepped forward. He's not ready. Lucius raised an eyebrow. You're protecting him now? Marcus stood tall. He's a child, not a beast. Lucius leaned in, voice low and dangerous. Rome doesn't ask what things are. Only how they serve. Marcus said nothing. But that night he took Arion aside. You're going to be shown off tomorrow. You'll be watched. Arion's lip trembled. Will he touch me? Marcus swallowed. Not if I can help it. Arion looked up at him for a long time. Then asked, will you run if they tell you to? Marcus shook his head. Not unless I'm carrying you. It was the first time Arion smiled, faint, fleeting but real. That night, Marcus lay awake staring at the ceiling. He had served Rome for 14 years. Fought in 3 provinces. Watched cities fall and rise. But none of it haunted him like the image of that boy in a box. Something inside him had shifted. And there was no going back. The garden was meant to impress. Torches lined the pathways in even rows. Laurel trees swayed lightly in the evening breeze. Wealthy guests lounged on low couches near fountains shaped like gods, and trays of pomegranates, honeyed figs, and roasted meats passed between manicured hands. But the center of attention that night was not the food. It was the boy. Arion stood near the marble basin, dressed in a thin white tunic barely reaching his knees. A golden thread cinched the cloth at his waist, and the bronze collar around his neck had been polished until it gleamed. Lucius smiled as he gestured toward him. My prize from Dacia. Proof that even the wildest things can be made beautiful. The guests laughed. Marcus stood by the columns watching. He had insisted on being present as part of the general's guard detail. He said nothing, barely moved. But his hand remained close to the dagger at his waist. A senator reached for a cup. Arion stepped forward to pour wine. His hands shook slightly, but he didn't spill. Lucius clapped. He learns quickly. Discipline is a finer sculptor than marble. As the boy moved between guests, Marcus watched every interaction. Every glance. Every hand that lingered too long. Then it happened. A merchant from Crete, a man reeking of perfume and power, placed a coin into Arion's collar. For the night, he said to Lucius. The general raised his cup. He's yours. Marcus moved instantly. He stepped forward, voice clear. He's not available. The crowd fell silent. Lucius turned slowly. Excuse me? Marcus didn't flinch. He's under my command. And tonight I say no. Lucius laughed, rising from his couch. Your command? He's property, Marcus. Not a soldier. Marcus faced him. Then consider this a mutiny. Gasps echoed through the garden. Lucius took a step forward, his face cold. You'd risk your career for a slave? He's not a slave. He's a boy. And I won't let you break another one. Lucius's voice dropped. Then you're done here. Marcus nodded. So be it. He turned to Arion and extended a hand. For a moment the boy froze. Then he took it. The two of them walked out of the garden in silence. No one stopped them. Not because they couldn't, but because they didn't know what it meant yet. Back in the stables, Marcus helped Arion remove the collar. The boy's skin was raw beneath the metal. Marcus cleaned the area with oil and cloth. Arion looked at him. He'll come for us. Marcus met his eyes. Then we won't be here. That night they didn't sleep. They packed food, water, cloaks, a map of the Appian Way. Before sunrise, they slipped through the servant gate and into the hills beyond the city. The road was dangerous. They'd be hunted. But they walked in silence, together, free, if only for the moment. And when the sun rose, Arion turned to Marcus and asked, If we find a place where no one owns anyone, will I still be afraid? Marcus answered, Maybe. But you won't be alone when you are. And for the first time, Arion believed him. The Appian Way stretched before them like an endless scar across the land. Dust rose beneath their sandals. Olive groves lined the edges of the road, silent witnesses to thousands of feet that had walked, run, bled over these stones. Some as soldiers, some as slaves. And now 2 fugitives walked in their shadow. Marcus kept Arion close, wrapped in a traveler's cloak. His small frame looked even smaller beneath the wool, but his eyes had changed. They no longer darted with panic. Now they scanned, studied, calculated. They rested under a broken aqueduct by midday. The sun beat down on the hills and flies buzzed near the discarded remains of a traveler's fire. Marcus offered dried bread and a flask of water. "Why did you do it?" Arion asked suddenly. Marcus didn't answer right away. Then, "Because you were alive. And no one looked at you like you were." Arion nodded, staring at the ground. "I thought maybe I had died. In that box." "You didn't," Marcus said. "You survived. And that takes more strength than any sword." They walked in silence until sunset. But news traveled faster than their feet. By the second night, they passed a merchant caravan that recognized Marcus's face. The whispers spread. A soldier who disobeyed a general. A boy who was never meant to speak. On the 4th morning they were ambushed near a stone bridge. 3 men, mercenaries hired by Lucius, stepped into the road. One pointed a blade at Marcus. "The general says the boy belongs to him." Marcus stepped forward. "The general's wrong." The second man chuckled. "You'll die for a child?" Marcus drew his sword. "No. I'll kill for him." The fight was short. Brutal. Marcus bled from the shoulder. One of the men fell into the river. Another limped away. The third lay on the stones, unmoving. Arion stood frozen, his face pale. Marcus wiped the blood from his blade and turned to him. "Don't look away. This is what it means to say no to Rome." They couldn't stay on the road anymore. Marcus guided them into the countryside, through shepherd paths and forgotten ruins. He knew of a place, an old friend, a woman named Tertia, who once healed wounded soldiers in exchange for silence. She lived in the mountains, near a collapsed villa taken back by the earth. When they arrived, Tertia opened the door without a word. She saw Marcus's injury, saw the boy, and said, "Come in." For 3 weeks they hid. Tertia treated Marcus's wound and gave Arion food, rest, and quiet. He began to speak more. He talked about his mother, her voice, her cooking, the smell of sea salt on her skin. He talked about a temple in Dacia, where he had been taken in by priests. Where he was told he was holy before Rome made him silent. One night, Arion stood outside looking at the stars. Marcus joined him. "Do you think they'll stop looking?" Arion asked. "No," Marcus said. "But I think you'll keep walking anyway." Arion looked up at him. "Why do you believe in me?" "Because when they opened that box, you didn't cry. You didn't scream. You stayed alive." The boy took a breath. And for the first time he whispered, "Thank you." Marcus didn't answer. He just placed a hand on Arion's shoulder and looked up at the stars beside him. Winter crept down from the hills faster than expected. Tertia's home, half villa, half refuge, offered shelter but not invisibility. And Rome never forgot. Word had reached the provinces. A general betrayed, a soldier vanished, a boy taken. Some called Marcus a traitor. Others quietly a hero. Inside the stone walls, Arion changed. He helped Tertia with herbs. Learned to grind root into paste. He started reading pieces of old scrolls Marcus brought from ruined libraries. At night, he sat by the fire and stared at it as if waiting for something. One night he spoke. "I want to go back." Marcus looked up sharply. "Back? Where?" "Rome," Arion said. Not to him. Not to the Domus. But to the others. "What others?" "The ones still inside." Tertia said nothing. She just stirred the fire. Marcus breathed in slowly. "It's not that simple. You were lucky to survive." Arion turned. "I wasn't lucky. I was rescued. There's a difference." Those words hit harder than a blade. The next morning, Arion disappeared for 2 hours. When he returned, his arms were full of smooth stones. He placed them in a circle on the ground, each marked with a name, some real, some imagined, some guessed. "These are for the ones who didn't get out," he said. Marcus walked over. "How many?" Arion didn't answer. "More than this." Marcus sat beside him, staring at the circle. "You really want to go back?" Arion nodded. "Not to be seen. To be a shadow. To help." Tertia finally spoke. "Then he'll need to be more than a child." Marcus said nothing for a long time. Then stood. "Then we'll teach him." The months that followed were hard. Marcus trained Arion not to fight, but to listen, to hide, to move unseen. Tertia taught him poisons, plants that stun the body but didn't kill. Arion learned to move like fog, to leave no footprint. By spring he could slip between trees without a sound. One day Marcus returned from a scouting trip with news. They're rebuilding Lucius's domus. Expanding. More guards. More walls. And more boys. Arion asked. Marcus nodded grimly. Tertia placed a cloth on the table. Inside it, a small ring made of copper. This was mine once. It belonged to someone who meant something to me. Now it's yours. Arion placed it on his finger. It didn't quite fit, but he kept it anyway. It wasn't just a ring. It was a vow. They returned at nightfall. Rome's walls loomed under a clouded sky. The domus glowed like a golden wound. Marcus stayed hidden in the hills. Arion moved alone. Dressed in a servant's cloak, barefoot, silent, he entered through a service corridor he remembered too well. Inside everything had changed. But the feeling hadn't. He passed a hallway and heard sobbing. A small room. A boy. No older than he had been. Arion didn't speak. He just whispered, "You'll be free soon." He left a wrapped parcel of food under the bed, and a sliver of copper shaped like a star. He moved again. Room by room he left messages. Marks. Bits of rope. Instructions. Routes. He didn't scream. He didn't fight. But he moved like fire. Quiet. Steady. Spreading. By dawn he was gone. Lucius never saw him. But two boys escaped that night. And in one of their hands was a stone, marked with a name. Arion. Lucius Aelius died alone. Not in battle. Not on a throne. But in his bath, face down, surrounded by silence. Some said it was age. Others said poison. But those who knew the domus whispered something stranger. The boy came back. But Arion didn't care for revenge. He cared for doors. For escape routes. For others. In the months that followed, the domus became a haunted place. Slaves disappeared. Whispered instructions were passed through laundry cords, scratched into stone. A piece of copper shaped like a star became a secret symbol. To those who saw it, it meant, someone is watching. Someone is coming. And Arion did return. Again. And again. Each time he brought a name with him. Tertia's home, once quiet and isolated, became a refuge. A haven for the forgotten. Boys and girls. Scars and silence. Marcus trained the older ones. Tertia healed the younger. Arion sat with them each night and whispered the words no one else had ever said to them. You weren't a gift. You were stolen. One day years later, Arion walked the Appian Way alone. He wore no collar. No disguise. He passed soldiers, senators, merchants. None recognized him. Not the boy who once knelt in a marble garden with trembling hands. He stopped at a ruined wall outside the city gates. A forgotten corner of an abandoned villa. He carried with him a hammer and a small chisel. He knelt and began to carve. Not a symbol. A list. A list of names. Some real. Some lost. Some he had never known. Dozens of them. When Marcus arrived, older now, slower in step, he stood beside him and asked, Do you remember all of them? Arion looked at the wall. I remember how they looked when they were afraid. Marcus placed a hand on his shoulder. Then they live. Tertia died in early spring. Quietly in her sleep. Arion buried her beneath the fig tree she used to sit under. No temple. No ceremony. Just the earth and a stone with her name. They carved a message beneath it. She opened the door. And that became the name of the network. The Door. In taverns, in hidden chambers beneath Rome, children passed stories. Of the soldier who turned against his general. Of the healer who sheltered the escaped. Of the boy who was once a prize, and became a shadow they could not silence. Arion never returned to the domus again. He didn't need to. Because it burned years later. No one ever proved who set the fire. But when the ashes were cleared, a copper ring was found in the rubble. It was shaped like a star. And it bore a single word inside, Arion. This isn't a story about a soldier. Or even a child. It's a story about choice. About what happens when one person says, this is not acceptable. Because cruelty survives on silence. But so does resistance. This story moved you, share it. Let the name Arion live where the empire tried to erase him. Like, comment, and subscribe so we never stop telling the stories of those who couldn't speak for themselves.